Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV Plus.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV Plus.
Well, that's because your idea of an emergency alert system is to have a chap pop out to the common and ring the village bell. Yes. The following podcast contains...
We're going to talk today about profanity. What I've found in my walk with the Lord is that the spirit of profanity is running rampant throughout the world.
Explicit language. Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you kept the Doomsday tape on the same shelf as the This Is the Test tape, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 458, How We Learn Not to Worry and Ignore the Bomb edition of the show. We were talking about that time in 1971 when America thought the nukes were coming because of a botched emergency broadcast test. Stay tuned. What the Hell Were You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Jimmy Earl's Bait Shop and Doomsday Supply. The world's falling apart and it's time to prep or cut bait. At Jimmy Earl's, you can do both. Along with our stocks of night crawlers, grubs, crickets, and minnows, you can also stock up on your end of the world needs. We've got it all from self-installed solar panels to a wide variety of dehydrated food stocks. No matter if you need a shortwave radio or high-dose anti-radiation meds, you can find it at Jimmy Earl's. While you're stocking up your bunker, why not pick up some crawdads and mealworms and spend some time on the pond? You'll miss it when the times come. Jimmy Earl's Big Shop and Doomsday Supply. The end is nigh, but hey, the fish is still biting.
This is a test. For the next 60 seconds, the station will conduct a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The broadcasters of your area in voluntary cooperation with the FCC have developed a system to keep you informed
in the event of an emergency.
If this had been an actual emergency, you would have been instructed where to tune in your area for news and official information. This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system. On WATM, Syracuse.
I know a lot of Gen X influencers out there love to drone on about how tough our generation is.
Kind of like you.
No, I'm not an influencer. I'm a podcaster. We do not influence. We entertain.
Are you sure about that?
I find myself highly entertaining. I'm my number one fan. But I am talking about all those old fucks on Instagram primarily that post their oh-so-clever rants on how drinking from garden hoses and parental neglect somehow made my generation tough and or strong. This is bullshit. All it did was make a disturbingly large number of my generation think Donald Trump has some really good ideas. Maybe they got some sort of rubber hose poisoning, I don't know. Another big trope is that Gen X lived in terror of nuclear annihilation. What a crock of neo-boomer borrowed bullshit this is. We didn't give a single thought to the idea. We didn't give a single thought to the idea that the world would end in a flash, and if we did, most of us were actually in favor of the idea.
Yeah, can't happen soon enough.
And I've talked before about growing up on Air Force bases. It made me pretty blasé about the chance of sudden nuclear death.
Your acts of bravery are irrefutable.
Outside of that, I never ducked nor covered. There were no air raid drills. We didn't have classes on how we were supposed to stare, that we weren't supposed to stare into the flash of the detonation. And by the mid-1970s, nobody gave a fuck.
If he dies, he dies.
I mean, until Reagan came along.
He said it.
And that started people thinking, holy shit, this crazy fucker might actually start World War III. And that began to be a little bit concerning. And then we had this movie called The Day After.
This is not an exercise.
Millisecond takes you beyond imagining, beyond tomorrow, and into the day after.
Which we'll get his whole episode someday. That movie scared Americans shitless, including the dotty old fucker in the White House. But you know what? Even after that, people weren't actually that worried about nuclear war. We'd lived with it for decades and gone through so many close calls. I mean, 4 other times in 1962 alone. And then, that's not including the Cuban Missile Crisis, we thought the world would end. Then the Arab-Israeli War of 73, there was a bad computer tape at NORAD that almost kicked off a nuclear war in 79 and 80, and there was the Able Archer incident in 83, another thing that will get its own show one day. But despite all of that, you know what? We kind of just ignored it and went on with our lives. After all, we had this whole system that was going to warn us if a real nuclear war was about to happen. You know, if it actually worked and someone doesn't send the wrong signal out over the airwaves. Which brings me to this week's topic, that time in 1971 when Americans were told the missiles were inbound and we should kiss our loved ones and then our own asses goodbye. Listeners who have not mentally blocked out all memories of the dark days between 2016 and 2021 might recall that something like this happened. That's because it happened in Hawaii in 2018.
And this morning, Hawaiian officials say they're determined to make sure that the false alarm that sent the entire state into panic never happens again.
Yeah, for 38 minutes yesterday, people feared that there was a missile flying through the air and about to hit Hawaii. And it's because of this alert. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. And this is a warning that was sent to people's phones. They showed up on their TVs. They played on the radio stations across the state.
State officials say all of this panic was caused by someone hitting the wrong button.
But what happened in 1971 was much bigger and much worse. So, let's get to it. We really have to begin with the emergency broadcast system.
Do we have to?
Sadly, we do. It began in 1951 when President Harry Truman decided that we needed a way to alert everyone that their lives were about to end suddenly in a bright flash of nuclear fury on the receiving end of a Rusky nuke.
Filthy bastard Tommy!
Called CON-LRAD, or Control of Electromagnetic Radiation, it was a system that hopped around the radio dial broadcasting emergency information. It hopped around because prior to the advent of nuclear missiles, using radio stations to relay such information was a super bad idea, since bombers used radio stations during World War II as a convenient way to home in on cities and bomb the shit out of them. But since missiles were around, we no longer really needed this. So by 1963, ICBMs made skipping unnecessary, so the emergency broadcast system was created, expanding the ability of the government to flash dire information of doom to its soon-to-be deceased citizens via satellite over radio televisions. And that one lady named Gladys Kintz, you know, she's the one in town who has all the hot goss. The emergency broadcast system also allowed the system to be accessed by state and local officials to send warnings about local events, to let people know,
holy shit, we really are gonna die!
From things like floods, fires, earthquakes, zombie uprisings, or bad food at the local Taco Bell. This system used a distinct and highly annoying sound to let you know that serious shit was coming down. I am neither ashamed of playing a minute-long poop joke nor of giggling my way through the entire thing. Though never used at a national level, the emergency broadcast system has been used over 20,000 times to warn public of natural disasters, and also,
there's a sale at Penny's!
In 1997, the emergency broadcast system was integrated into the emergency alert system, which did all the things I mentioned earlier, but also broadcast such warnings via the nascent cellular network, ensuring that at 3:30 a.m. that you would be jolted out of bed by the shrill screech of the system to inform you that a child is missing 3 states away, just in case you wanted to get out of bed, get dressed, and drive to Delaware to look for the kid at 3:30 a.m. Now, there's no question the emergency broadcast, the emergency alert system has saved countless lives. I mean, if it weren't for the emergency broadcast system, the only way we'd have known that a tornado was coming when I was a kid was some leftover air raid sirens from World War II to tell us that the tornado was about to suck our young lives into the vortex.
Cow. I gotta go, Julia. We got cows. Another cow.
Actually, I think that was the same one.
So having that shit blast into our phones in the middle of the night is a pretty damn good idea. Amber Alerts are a good thing, but also deeply annoying, and almost everyone turns them off on their phones because, again, we're not getting out of bed at 3:30 a.m. to drive to Delaware. This can also show you that how being too connected all the time leads to apathy. Another thing that can make people tune out is when you get these messages incredibly wrong. There's a fine line for governments, be they local, state, or federal, to decide when and how to deploy an emergency alert. And what's more, you do have to test the system from time to time to make sure that everyone up and down the chain knows what to do when the real thing happens. So now you're tossing in test. Do this too often and people tune out. Don't do them often enough and people die who don't need to die. And sometimes, just sometimes, you really fuck up. And send out the message that the end of the world as we know it is on the way. I feel fine. When it actually wasn't. So you can see there's a problem there. People have to believe the system works if it's going to work at all. This story of one of the times that it didn't work in a really big way, stopped worrying and learned to ignore the bomb. It was Saturday, February 20th, 1971. For most of the nation, it was cold and rainy because we still had a winter back then. The country was reeling from the revelation that Dick Nixon had taped himself committing all kinds of crimes in the Oval Office. This was back when the president wasn't allowed to commit crimes just because he was the president. The previous Thursday, 46 million Americans had watched the Baltimore Colts defeat the Dallas Cowboys 16-13 on a 32-yard field goal by the Colts in Super Bowl number 5. Super Bowl 5, also known as the Blunder Bowl or the Blooper Bowl, because both teams played like shit. This was back also when a Super Bowl did not legally have to be on a Sunday. The Dow was down 20 on the closing bell the Friday before, and when you turned on the radio at 9:30 that Saturday morning, you stood a good chance of hearing the number one song in America by the Osmonds, One Bad Apple.
One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. Oh, give it one more try before you give up on love. One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. Oh, I don't care what they say. I don't care what you heard.
Ah, yes, the Osmonds. The Mormons' answer to the Jackson 5. Rip off! Where was I? Well, if you didn't hear the Osmonds, perhaps you might have heard a song by the Partridge Family, only to have your morning routine rudely interrupted.
25 before 10. Doesn't somebody want to be wanted? The Partridge Family.
Somebody want to be wanted like me.
This station has interrupted its regular program at the request of the United States government to participate in the emergency broadcast system serving the Fort Wayne area. During this period, many radio stations will remain on the air, broadcasting news and official information for areas assigned to them. This station will remain on the air and will serve the Fort Wayne area. If you are not located in the Fort Wayne area, you should now tune your radio to other stations until you hear one which is broadcasting news and information for your area. You are listening to the emergency broadcast system serving the Fort Wayne area.
Then, as now, people were used to hearing these tests, even more so because modern ears don't tune into broadcast radio and television as much as we did in 1971. And this was the day and time when the tests were regularly conducted. At first, things seemed pretty normal, but astute listeners might have noticed something. something a little odd.
Something is missing.
No one actually said the words, "This is a test." And the DJ, well, he sounds,
He sounds terrified.
or at least utterly baffled. As time went by, the confusion mounted, and more people began to catch on that this was not a test and appeared to be an actual doomsday message.
WOWO received this emergency announcement just moments ago. We have to verify, we did verify with a special message in code, and this is an emergency action directed by the Emergency Network and directed by the President. You've heard Bob Chase tell you that you are to tune to the emergency station in your area that is remaining on the air. WOWO will remain on the air here in the Fort Wayne area to broadcast any emergency information that is coming in. At this point, at the microphone, I know of nothing to cause this. We are waiting from Stuart Dan in the WOWO newsroom to bring us some information from any of our wire services.
Things did not get any better as radio stations that were not supposed to broadcast in the event of an actual attack did what they were supposed to do and stopped broadcasting. Imagine for a moment, Farmer John, you're listening to the radio on a cold Saturday morning, and then all of a sudden your ominous message from the government telling you to change the station, and the farm report you were just listening to goes fucking dark.
Well, that can't be good.
So you start from the dial looking for an active signal, and when you find it, it's just another baffled broadcaster repeating the same thing. We don't know what's happening. We're trying to find out what is happening. Please stay tuned for more information. In the meantime, here's some inoffensive instrumental music to listen to while you're waiting for the bombs to fall. The reactions were understandable. From the New York Times in the following days, quote, "I saw the authenticated message and I thought, my God, it's December 7th all over again," said Chuck Kelly of WWCM in Brazil, Indiana, who took a station off the air for 22 minutes. "I thought I was going to have a heart attack trying to open the damn envelope containing the code word," said David Skinner, the news director of WEVA in Emporia, Virginia. "I haven't felt that way since John Kennedy was killed." Larry Best of KXEL in Waterloo, Iowa, gave this account. "I knew it. The test was coming across, but I didn't pay much attention to it until I ripped it off the wire. Then I noticed the message authenticator. It was the right one, all right. It kind of shook us up. We immediately left the air and went off into instructions for emergency programming and played the tape we have of it. Immediately, in seconds, all 3 telephones in the office were jangling like mad. I was absolutely terrified," said Mrs. Peter Ori of Chicago. "It was so authentic. I just knew we were at war and the president would come on and say what had happened. In Melbourne, Florida, a woman was driving when she heard the alert. She pulled her car to the side of the road and didn't do anything. I just sat there, being scared," unquote.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do? We're some real pretty shit now, man.
You finished?
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
What had happened was, well, it's both really simple and yet somehow extremely complicated. How the emergency broadcast system worked is that every radio television station licensed by the Federal Communications Commission, which was all of them, was required to have a dedicated teletype printer linked directly to NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. The teletype was basically a real-time one-way fax machine. It received messages as they were transmitted from whatever source they were linked to, and this one had only one sender, NORAD. And on February 20th, at the usual test time, the operator at NORAD put the computer tape with a message to be blasted out to every radio and television station American for the test, just as always, except he put the tape in for the real deal.
Oopsie! Oh God, oh God.
This was the message. "This is an emergency action notification directed by the President. Normal broadcasting will cease immediately. All stations will broadcast EAN Message 1, preceded by the attention signal, per FCC rules. Only stations holding NDEA may stay on air in accord with their state EBS plan. Broadcast EAS Message 1, Message Authenticator, Hatefulness, 20 Feb." It was the Message Authenticator, a code word that let the recipient know the message was genuine, that was different from the test message. The stations were sent in advance the authenticator words, and for each test, they were supposed to check that the proper test authenticator word was in the message. More from the New York Times, quote, every 3 months, each radio station is sent a list of code words for each day that must be included in a message from the warning center if an actual alert is in progress. There are also code words to be used for unscheduled tests. The word for this month is elated, and the word for last month was undressed. For authentic messages, there are 2 code words. One to begin a message announcing an alert, and another to end it. The pair for February 20th was hatefulness, impish. The others from the last few weeks include Lindbergh measured, Putty Root Barbizon, Wing-Footed Gramflower, and Manhole Sergeant, unquote.
Sounds dirty, but it's not.
Everyone more or less knew the test passwords because in most newsrooms they were literally taped to the teletype machine when they arrived every 3 months. In 1970s, equivalent of taping your Windows passwords inside your computer desk drawer. So when the emergency action message arrived, they read the word hatefulness, and it started a mad scramble for the list of authenticator words, not unlike when the network server goes down in a low-budget IT department, and the IT dudes have to spend an hour digging around the supervisor's desk for the admin passwords.
If there's a picture of his wife and his kids...
The frame is always in that frame. When the radio guys finally found the authenticator list, if they could find them, it was quite a shock to discover that...
this is not a drill.
And this was indeed a...
Sir, we have a properly formatted emergency action message from the National Command Authority, sir. Request permission to authenticate, sir.
Permission granted, authenticate.
The balloon had gone up. The shit had hit the fan. The chair was against the wall and...
Jean a de longues moustaches. Je répète, Jean a de longues moustaches.
To put it ever so bluntly...
We're all gonna die! We're all gonna die!
Of course, not every station had a coherent plan for the end of the world. Many of them didn't even read the message on the teletype and continued playing music, or the farm report, or swap shot, whatever the regularly scheduled programming was, which in a way is kind of worse than sending out an accidental doomsday message. But, you know, that's America for you. So in a lot of places, life just went on as normal. But in much of the country, panic was starting to seep in. Meanwhile, back at NORAD, the merest inkling of a problem began to permeate through the office, sending out the message as all of a sudden, all of their fucking phones looking up like a 5-megaton warhead dropped over downtown Chicago. It did not take long for them to realize that,
I made a huge, tiny mistake.
But these were professional men, trusted with the vital task of disseminating critical information to the people of this great country in times of great crisis. Not rank amateurs. They knew accidents could happen, and there was a plan if something like this ever did happen. All they needed to do was send the all-clear message saying,
I've made a huge mistake.
Including the proper authentication word to let the readers know that the message was in reality...
I've made a huge mistake.
Easy fix, right? Of course not! What they did instead was send the regular test message out with the test message authenticator code, which was exactly the wrong thing to do because it was quite clear in all the code books that this was exactly the kind of thing that the commies would do.
Commie bastards.
In the event of a real thing to spoof the system. So as the teletypes chatted again with the test message on authenticator, which again was hardly a secret, it was taped right there on thousands of teletypes, it just made it even more likely that this was the real thing and the world was about to come to an end in a suddenly and tragically comic way. As the minutes tick by, keep in mind that the average flight time for a Soviet ICBM to the continental United States was just shy of 30 minutes, and the situation was not magically fixing itself in that time. Confusion reigned in newsrooms and at NORAD. This is the TikTok from the New York Times. Quote, apparently, soon after the alert was sent out, the National Warning Center realized the error. The message was sent saying, this is the National Warning Center. Cancel EAN tape sent at 9:33 Eastern Standard Time. However, because this message did not have any authenticator word, the stations were obliged to ignore it, which is what they did. At 9:59, the center tried again with message authenticator hatefulness, cancel message sent at 9:33 Eastern Standard Time. However, since hatefulness was the code word to initiate the alert and not end it, stations should have ignored that message too, which they did. At 10:13, the center, again, this is at NORAD, at last found the right formula. Message authenticator impish. Cancel message sent at 9:33 Eastern Standard Time, unquote. How did this clusterfuck happen? The answers were, they weren't reassuring. Again, from the New York Times, quote, I can't imagine how the hell I did it, unquote. Waylon S. Eberhardt, the man who sent the message, told the Times.
Thanks, I guess.
A few days later, summed up how not reassuring all of this was. More from the Times, quote, if a fiction writer had written a story depicting in advance the actual sequence of events, most readers would have rejected the idea as preposterous. Nevertheless, it all happened. It took an extraordinary number of minutes for the warning center to wake up to the blunder. Then something even more disturbing happened. It turned out that the center was not instantly prepared to cancel the warning, but had to scrounge around frantically to find the correct code words. Again, they're always in the lead IT guy's picture of his wife and kids picture frame. That's just where they're all at. To find the right code to authenticate the cancellation. 40 minutes went by between the beginning and the end of this unbelievable sequence of errors. Enough time for a ballistic missile to travel over 10,000 miles. The gross unpreparedness and confusion at the receiving end in many radio stations, television station studios were equally illuminating. Some stations never even got the message for reasons that varied from jammed paper and a news ticker to a clerk's failure to look at the ticker until the whole incident was already history. At the other extreme, it was the intelligent reaction of these broadcasters who checked the emergency action message with an alternative warning source and learned that no presidential alert had been issued. A comprehensive study of how all the nation's broadcasters reacted to this unprecedented situation would be very useful, unquote. Surprisingly or not, this little oopsie had a stunningly small impact on the national memory. I mean, I was all of 2 years old when it happened, so I had more important things to worry about at the time.
Did you poop? No.
It wasn't until the Hawaii thing happened that the internet really started talking about it, because the internet loves to talk about old shit when new shit goes down that reminds them of the old shit. That's the entire reason this podcast exists. It did cause a whole bottom-up review of the emergency broadcast system. Increasing computer automation gradually took over the human elements of the system, which brought its own problems and still did not completely remove human fuckery from the equation. Again, see Hawaii in 2018. But it streamlined the process, and if nothing else, it took the teletype and codebook elements out of it. History.com sums it up, quote, in response to the uproar, officials changed the way tests were conducted. Test languages changed, though radio stations could and sometimes did transmit in any way they chose, including in song form. That's what we played at the top of the show. In 1997, the system was upgraded to the emergency alert system. And on October 2nd, 2018, the government conducted its first test of the presidential alert sent out to all cell phones nationwide. The system may be newer, but there's still one lasting legacy of the disastrous false alarm in 1971. The jarring, screeching sounds you hear during the emergency alert system broadcast test. Like the sounds of information being transmitted over a modem, these tones transmit data to broadcasters. Data that tells them what kind of situation is in progress and whether or not the transmission is a test or a false alarm.
Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
But I think more than anything, it demonstrated how little we actually worried about the bomb by the early 70s. Or at least how little people paid attention to the shit they hear on the radio. People had lived under the threat of total nuclear annihilation for decades, and frankly, they were kind of over it. I can honestly say we didn't really think much about it when I was a kid, aside from a few conversations with my dad. I never worried about it until I was stationed on a nuke base in 1988, and even then I figured,
there's nothing I can do about that.
Except grab a bottle of whiskey and, you know,
we could live beside the ocean, leave the fire behind, swim out past the breakers, watch the world die.
Yeah, I know that song wouldn't come out for another few years, but that was the sentiment. Today, we still live in a world with over 12,000 nuclear warheads, mostly in U.S. and Russian hands, but China has 410, enough to really ruin a Saturday morning for America. And even North Korea got harsh and mellow for the West Coast, and we're all like,
yeah, well, you know, yes.
So did you see that TikTok where the chicken is wearing really big shoes? That's a biffer. which I am told is a Gen Z slang for abbreviation for be fucking for real or be serious in response to something so incredible it cannot be real. I don't know Gen Z slang. And I'm not sure whether this is a good or a bad thing, but I also know that nuclear weapons kind of have to take a seat next to climate change, creeping fascism, and global pandemics. Also, maybe there are aliens on Earth now. No one's quite clear on that, but maybe. So I get it. We have, after decades of the sword of Damocles dangling on that thread, learned not to worry, to ignore the bomb, and just go on with our lives. So far beyond our control that we just don't have anything to say about it anymore. But I would kind of like some clarification on this alien shit.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
That is it for the show this week. Oh, pod friends, I have so many stories like this. They're what I like to call nuclear boo-boos. Some of which I'm not really sure if I'm legally allowed to talk about. But hey, what's the worst they can do? Throw me in Gitmo? I mean, that's going to happen anyway if Trump wins. But at least Gavin would finally get the show, assuming he isn't right there in Gitmo with me. We are fully back on our bullshit right now. We have a slate of shows leading up to the October Spooktacular that I think you will find, if not delightful, at least
tolerable.
Speaking of tolerable, rate and review this show so others can take a listen and hopefully find us tolerable. If you more than tolerate us, why not kick us $1 at the patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. All proceeds will go to paying our legal fees when we finally get shipped off to Gitmo. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits, otherwise he will have to activate the emergency podcast alert system over at Seltzer Kings, which is just basically a recorded Danny Tamborelli saying "Why God, why" over and over again. It's a thing they have. And so for me, Dave, you and I in a little toy shop buy some balloons with some money we save, and one by one, we let them go. Bledsoe, producer.
Back at base, bugs in the software flash the message, something's out there.
Gavin! And all the fictional 99 ministers meeting, we want to say, something is up with those goddamn balloons. We tried to warn you about this before, but no, you didn't listen. And we'll see you all next week.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
The plot thickened outside Al Capone's vault.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.